Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's session with a focus on listening skills. This presentation is titled, A Presentation on Listening Skills, and it's designed to help us understand and improve the way we listen. We'll explore key techniques, common challenges, and practical tips to become better listeners. So, let's dive in and discover how improving our listening can make a big difference in both our personal and professional lives. Let's take a quick look at the contents of today's presentation. We'll start with the introduction, then move into the basic communication skills profile. From there, we'll focus on effective listening and understand why it is so crucial, which is highlighted under the importance of listening. We'll address some common fallacies about listening to clear up misconceptions, and then explore what comprehending truly involves. It's important to distinguish between listening and hearing, so we'll examine that difference in detail. Next, we'll discuss what real listening looks like in practice, including the physical and physiological barriers that can interfere with our ability to listen effectively. We'll also look at different types of listening, continuing with more examples to deepen our understanding. Objectives of listening will be covered to show why improving this skill matters. Then, we'll walk through the active listening process step by step, emphasizing techniques that make us better listeners. We'll also identify barriers to effective listening, including psychological and physical ones, and offer practical tips for being a good listener. Finally, we'll wrap up with a brief bibliography to point you toward further resources. Throughout this presentation, keep in mind that effective listening is a cornerstone of successful communication and plays a vital role in both personal and professional relationships. Let's talk about the first and arguably most important communication skill, listening. We probably spend more time listening than doing anything else in our daily interactions. It's a skill that we use constantly, yet it often doesn't get the attention it deserves. Like any skill, listening requires practice to improve. But what really sets effective listening apart is that it's an active process. It's not just about hearing words, it's about paying full attention, understanding what's being said, and engaging with the speaker. When we listen actively, we're better able to connect, understand, and respond appropriately. So, in the context of this presentation, remember that honing your listening skills is fundamental to effective communication overall. It's the foundation that allows all the other skills, like speaking and responding, to really shine. Let's talk about effective listening. So, what exactly is that? Effective listening is really a process. It involves analyzing sounds around us, then organizing those sounds into recognizable patterns. Once we've done that, we interpret these patterns to understand what is being communicated. Ultimately, we're trying to understand the message by inferring its meaning. Many of the problems we face in our daily lives, whether at work, with friends, or family, often come down to ineffective listening or sometimes even a lack of listening altogether. When we don't really listen, misunderstandings happen, conflicts arise, and relationships can suffer. So this concept of effective listening is crucial because it helps us connect better with others, reduces miscommunication, and makes our interactions more meaningful. It ties directly into our overall theme of improving communication skills, because at the core, listening well is key to understanding and being understood. Let's focus on the foundation of all communication skills, which is listening. It's actually the very first skill we learn in life, and it's crucial because without good listening, the rest of our communication can fall apart. When we talk about the order of learning communication skills, listening comes first, followed by speaking, then reading, and finally writing. This order makes sense because listening helps us understand others before we respond or express ourselves. It's the cornerstone that supports effective speaking and comprehension. So, as we develop our overall communication abilities, remember that sharpening our listening skills is the most important step. It sets the stage for better speaking, reading, and writing, all of which are essential for clear, confident communication in any context. Now, let's talk about the difference between listening and hearing. According to the Elmhurst College Learning Center, hearing and listening are not the same thing. Hearing is actually the first step in the process of listening. It happens when our ears pick up sound waves and send them to our brain. This is simply our sense of hearing. Listening, on the other hand, is much more active. It's a communication process that requires us to participate actively. To really understand and respond appropriately, we need to engage our minds and focus on what's being said. When we listen actively, we're not just hearing words, we're interpreting their meaning and evaluating the message before we respond. This means that, while someone is talking, our brain is already working behind the scenes. Our thoughts actually move faster than speech, which can be both a blessing and a challenge. The key is to be mindful. Don't let your thoughts run away into daydreams or distractions. If we allow our minds to wander, we lose the chance to be truly active listeners, which can undermine effective communication. So the takeaway here is, always remember that listening is an active process that requires effort and focus, especially because our minds can race ahead of what's being said. That's how we become better communicators and more engaged listeners overall. Let's take a closer look at the basic communication skills profile. On this slide, we see a table that highlights 4 key skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. For each of these, we've identified the order in which these skills are typically learned, how much they are used, and how much they are taught. Starting with listening, it's usually the first communication skill we learn. It's fundamental because it forms the foundation for understanding others. We also see that listening is the most used skill. It's critical in both everyday interactions and more formal settings. Interestingly, it's taught later in the sequence, coming fourth, perhaps because it's often developed informally before formal instruction. Moving on to speaking, it's the second skill we learn and is also used quite extensively. However, it's taught a bit earlier than listening, ranking third in instruction. This makes sense because speaking often follows listening, and both are essential for effective communication. Reading is the third skill in the learning order and is used frequently. It's taught second, which highlights its importance in acquiring knowledge and understanding written information. Its position in both use and teaching underscores its role in education and beyond. Finally, writing is the last skill we typically learn, but interestingly, it's the first to be taught in formal settings. Writing is used less often in daily communication compared to listening or speaking, but mastering it is crucial for clear, professional, and academic communication. Overall, this profile helps us understand the natural progression of communication skills and how their use and teaching are interconnected. Recognizing these patterns allows us to better tailor our communication training and educational strategies to meet learners where they are and guide them effectively through their development. Let's talk about some common fallacies about listening that many of us might believe. First, there's the idea that listening isn't my problem. But the truth is, everyone can improve their listening skills, and recognizing that is the first step. Then, people often think that smarter individuals are naturally better listeners. However, being intelligent doesn't automatically make someone a good listener. Listening is a skill that can be developed by anyone. Next, some assume that listening and hearing are the same thing. But hearing is a passive, physical process, while listening is active and involves understanding and engagement. Moving on, there's a misconception that listening improves just with age. While experience helps, conscious effort and practice are what truly enhance listening skills, regardless of age. Another myth is that good readers are automatically good listeners. Reading and listening are different skills, and excelling in one doesn't necessarily mean you excel in the other. Finally, many believe that listening skills are tough to learn. But in reality, with awareness and deliberate practice, anyone can become a better listener. Understanding these fallacies helps us realize that listening is a skill we can all work on, and that's a key part of this overall presentation on effective communication. Now let's look at the objectives of listening. First, listening helps us learn. When we listen carefully, we absorb new information and understand concepts better. It's a vital part of the learning process. Second, listening increases our understanding. By paying close attention, we grasp the meaning behind words, which improves communication overall. Third, listening can be a way to advise or counsel. When someone speaks, truly listening allows us to offer better support or guidance. Lastly, listening can also be about relieving boredom, like when we listen to music. It's a simple way to relax and enjoy ourselves. These objectives show how versatile listening is. It's not just about hearing, but about engaging, understanding, and connecting. This ties into the overall theme of effective communication and the importance of honing our listening skills. So, let's look at some interesting research findings. Did you know that we spend about a quarter of our waking hours just listening? It's a significant part of our daily routine. In fact, at the workplace, the data shows that, on average, people spend roughly 32.7% of their time listening. That's nearly a third of their workday focused on hearing and interpreting information. Meanwhile, they spend about 25.8% of their time speaking, which makes sense because communication is a two-way street. And writing takes up around 22.6% of their time, highlighting how much we engage with written communication as well. Now, what's really important here is understanding that effective listening is actually the most crucial skill for becoming a successful manager. It's not just about hearing words, it's about paying close attention, interpreting the messages accurately, and remembering what's been said. This skill helps us better understand our team, improve collaboration, and make smarter decisions. So, as we move forward in this presentation, keep in mind that honing our listening skills is key to effective leadership and management. Let's talk about the importance of listening in communication. First, it's crucial to understand that communication isn't complete without effective listening. You can speak clearly, but if you're not truly listening, the message might not be received as intended. A good listener has the ability to restructure vague or unclear speech, helping to clarify the speaker's meaning. This not only benefits the speaker, but also ensures that the message is understood correctly. When you listen attentively, you also encourage the speaker to communicate more openly and effectively, which creates a positive cycle of better dialogue. Another key point is that a good listener can detect underlying prejudices, assumptions, or attitudes that might influence how a message is delivered or received. Recognizing these nuances allows for a deeper understanding of the conversation and helps in addressing any underlying issues. Finally, being a good listener means you learn more than someone who is indifferent or disengaged. When you truly pay attention, you're gaining insights, understanding perspectives, and building stronger connections. So, in the context of overall communication, listening isn't just passive hearing. It's an active, essential skill that enhances clarity, empathy, and mutual understanding. Now, let's talk about the basic steps of real listening. There are 3 key parts to really understanding someone. The first one is hearing. And hearing simply means listening enough to catch what the speaker is saying. It's the initial stage where you're just tuned in enough to pick up the words. Next is understanding. This is where you take what you've heard and process it in your own way. It's about making sense of the message and really grasping the meaning behind the words. Finally, we have judging. Once you're sure you understand what the speaker has said, it's important to think about whether it makes sense to you. You evaluate the information, consider its relevance, and decide how it fits into the bigger picture. These steps, hearing, understanding, and judging, are essential because effective listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about engaging with the message thoughtfully and critically, which ties back to the overall theme of developing better communication skills. All right, let's take a closer look at the steps involved in the active listening process. First, we have hearing. This is simply the initial perception of sound, where we become aware of the speaker's words. It's the foundation of active listening, but it's just the starting point. Next is filtering, where we focus on what's relevant and important, tuning out distractions to really hone in on the message. Then comes comprehending, which is about understanding the meaning behind what's being said. It's not just hearing the words, but grasping the intent and context. After that, we have remembering, which involves retaining the information, so we can recall details later and engage meaningfully in the conversation. Finally, responding is the last step, where we show that we've been listening through verbal or nonverbal cues, providing feedback or asking questions to keep the dialogue active. These steps highlight how active listening isn't just passively hearing. It's a process that requires intentional effort at each stage. When we master this process, we improve our communication, build stronger relationships, and foster understanding, key themes that run throughout this presentation. Let's talk about hearing, which is actually the very first step in the listening process. Hearing is all about the sensory perception of sound, that initial moment when sound waves reach our ears. But it's not just about hearing sounds, it's about what happens after that. Once we perceive the sound, our brain begins to process it further, trying to make sense of what we're hearing. Now, for learning to be effective, hearing isn't enough on its own. It's crucial that we listen with attentiveness and concentration. If our mind is distracted or we're not paying close attention, we might hear the sounds but miss the meaning behind them. So, in the context of the overall theme, understanding that hearing is the foundational step reminds us that active listening begins with being present and focused. Only then can we truly understand and process information effectively. Now, moving on to the next step in our hearing process, filtering. This is where the magic of our auditory system really kicks in. When we hear sounds, our brain doesn't just passively receive everything. It actively senses and filters these sounds to make sense of them. Essentially, it sorts through the incoming sounds and categorizes them as either wanted or unwanted. The key idea here is that not every sound we hear is equally important. Our brain helps us focus on the sounds that matter most, like a conversation in a noisy room, while filtering out background noise or irrelevant sounds. This process is crucial because it allows us to concentrate and respond appropriately to our environment. Connecting this to the overall theme, effective filtering is foundational for understanding speech and navigating complex auditory environments. It's what enables us to tune in to what we care about and ignore the rest, making our hearing more efficient and meaningful. Now, let's talk about comprehension. This is the stage where the listener truly understands what I've been trying to communicate. It's not just about hearing the words, but about absorbing and grasping the message on a deeper level. When someone comprehends, they connect the dots, interpret the meaning, and see how it fits into the bigger picture. This is crucial because effective communication isn't complete until the message is understood. Remember, the goal is for the listener to walk away with clarity, to feel confident that they know what I intended to convey. So, fostering comprehension is really about making our communication clear, engaging, and meaningful. Now, let's talk about the two key aspects of effective communication: remembering and responding. When we remember, it means that the message we've received is stored in our memory. This allows us to recall it later, which is crucial for understanding and ongoing conversations. Essentially, it's about how we retain information so it can inform our future interactions. On the other hand, responding happens at the very end of the communication process. It's our way of showing that we've received and understood the message. Responding confirms that we're engaged and that the message has been successfully processed. Together, these steps, remembering and responding, are vital for ensuring clear and meaningful communication. They help build trust and make sure that the message is not only received, but also understood and remembered for future interactions. This aligns perfectly with our overall goal of improving our communication skills to foster better relationships and collaboration. So, now let's explore the different types of listening, starting with discriminative listening. This type is really about the fundamental skills of hearing and distinguishing sounds. It involves being able to notice the difference between various sounds, whether they're spoken words or nonverbal cues, and also differentiating between familiar and unfamiliar language. This is crucial because it lays the foundation for more complex listening skills. Next up is comprehension listening. This is where we attach meaning to what we're hearing. It's not just about hearing the words, but understanding them in context. It also includes picking up on nonverbal messages, like tone of voice or body language, which often carry important information. So, comprehension listening helps us make sense of the entire message being communicated. Finally, we have evaluative listening. This is a more active process where we critically analyze and assess the message. We're judging its credibility, relevance, or acceptability. This type of listening is vital when we need to make decisions or form opinions based on what we've heard. All these types of listening connect to our overall goal of becoming more effective communicators. Understanding these distinctions helps us adapt our listening strategies depending on the situation, making our interactions more meaningful and productive. Now, let's continue exploring the different types of listening. First, there's attentive listening, which really revolves around paying close attention to the words being spoken. It's about being fully present and engaged with the speaker, making sure I understand the message clearly. Next, we have pretense listening. This is quite common. It's when I might hear what's being said, but I'm not truly listening. Instead, I might just be pretending to listen, perhaps nodding along or giving the appearance of engagement, but internally I'm not processing the information. Then there's selective listening. This involves choosing which parts of the message I focus on. I might pay attention only to what interests me or what I deem important, while tuning out the rest. It's like filtering the conversation based on my priorities, which can be useful but also risky if I miss key details. Finally, we have intuitive listening. This is a bit more subtle. It's about listening through my intuitive mind by quieting internal dialogue, so I can sense what's really being communicated beyond just the words. It's about tuning into the emotion, tone, and underlying meaning, which can deepen my understanding and connection. All these types connect to the overall theme of effective listening, highlighting that listening isn't just hearing words, but actively engaging with the message in different ways, depending on the situation. Now, let's talk about some of the barriers to effective listening that we might encounter. First, we have physical barriers. These are external factors like noise, poor acoustics, or technical issues that can make it difficult to hear and understand the speaker clearly. It's important to be aware of these so we can find ways to minimize them. Next, we have people-related barriers, which are more about how individuals behave or react during communication. These can be divided into physiological and psychological barriers. Physiological barriers include issues like hearing impairments or fatigue, things that physically hinder our ability to listen effectively. Psychological barriers, on the other hand, involve mental and emotional states. For example, if we're distracted, stressed, or emotionally overwhelmed, it becomes much harder to focus on what's being said. Sometimes, preconceived notions or biases can also prevent us from truly listening with an open mind. Connecting this to our overall theme, understanding these barriers helps us develop better listening skills. By recognizing what might interfere, we can actively work to overcome these obstacles and become more engaged and effective listeners. Now, let's discuss physical barriers that can really hinder effective communication. First, noise is a major factor. It can come from various sources and make it difficult for people to focus and understand each other. Next, frequent interruptions can disrupt the flow of a conversation, leading to misunderstandings or missed information. Poor acoustics in a room also play a big role. They can make voices sound muffled or distorted, which hampers clarity. Uncomfortable seating arrangements might not seem obvious at first, but when people are physically uncomfortable, their attention wanes and their ability to engage diminishes. Message overload is another concern. When too much information is thrown at someone at once, it becomes overwhelming, and key points can get lost. Mechanical devices, like faulty microphones or projectors, can also create disruptions, making it hard for the message to come across clearly. Lastly, an uncomfortable environment, whether it's too hot, too cold, or just generally uninviting, can distract participants and reduce their ability to focus. All of these barriers highlight how important it is to create a conducive physical setting for communication to be successful, aligning with our overall goal of improving effective interactions. Now, let's talk about some physiological barriers that can impact our ability to listen effectively. First, the state of health of both the listener and the speaker plays a significant role. If either of us isn't feeling well or is experiencing health issues, our concentration and comprehension can suffer. It's important to recognize that good health supports better listening. Next, disability, such as hearing deficiencies, can make it challenging to grasp what's being communicated. When someone has hearing impairments, they might miss out on key details, which underscores the need for accommodations and patience in communication. Finally, wandering attention is a natural phenomenon. Our minds can process words at a much faster rate than most speakers can talk. This means that our thoughts might drift away while we're listening, making it harder to stay fully engaged. Recognizing these physiological barriers helps us understand why listening isn't always as straightforward as it seems, and it emphasizes the importance of being mindful of these factors in our communication. Let's talk about some psychological barriers that can really impact our ability to listen effectively. One common barrier is being unsure of the speaker's ability. When we doubt whether the person speaking is knowledgeable or credible, it can make us tune out or not pay full attention. This preconceived notion affects how we process what's being said. Another significant barrier is personal anxiety. If we're preoccupied with our own worries or concerns, it becomes difficult to focus on the speaker's message. Instead of truly listening, our minds might be elsewhere, which hampers understanding and engagement. And then there's attitude, specifically, having a know-it-all attitude. If we believe we already understand everything or think we don't need to listen because we're confident in our own knowledge, we're less open to new information. This arrogance can block us from truly hearing and absorbing what others are sharing. All of these barriers, doubts about the speaker, personal anxiety, and an overconfident attitude, highlight how our mindset can shape our listening effectiveness. Recognizing these barriers is the first step toward overcoming them and becoming better listeners, which ties back to our overall goal of improving communication skills. Let's talk about some additional psychological barriers that can really impact our ability to listen effectively. One of these is impatience. When we're impatient, we tend to want to get to the point quickly, and that can actually hinder the listening process. Instead of fully engaging with what the other person is saying, we might be tempted to jump to conclusions or interrupt. Patience is key to truly understanding someone else's perspective. Another important barrier is emotional blocks. These are often rooted in deep-seated beliefs or past experiences that influence how we respond to opposing ideas. Sometimes, these beliefs make it difficult for us to listen openly because we automatically dismiss or become defensive when we hear something that challenges our worldview. Recognizing these emotional blocks is crucial because overcoming them allows us to listen more empathetically and effectively. Overall, understanding these psychological barriers helps us see where our own listening habits might be falling short. By being aware of impatience and emotional blocks, we can work on strategies to overcome them, ultimately fostering better communication and stronger relationships. Now, let's talk about some practical tips for being a good listener. First, it's important to give your full attention to the speaker. That means putting away distractions and really focusing on what they're saying. When your mind is focused, you're more likely to understand and remember the message. Second, make sure your mind is clear and free from distractions. This helps you stay engaged and truly hear what's being communicated. And finally, let the speaker finish before you begin to talk. Interrupting can break the flow and cause misunderstandings. By following these simple but effective techniques, you can become a more attentive listener and improve your communication skills overall. All right, let's talk about some additional tips to really improve your listening skills. First, it's important to let yourself finish listening before you start speaking or responding. Rushing to answer can cause you to miss key details or misunderstand the message. Next, focus on listening for the main ideas. Don't get caught up in every single word. Try to grasp the overall point or purpose of what's being said. This helps keep the conversation or discussion focused and productive. If something isn't clear, don't hesitate to ask questions. Clarifying your understanding ensures you're on the same page and shows that you're engaged. It's better to ask than to make assumptions that could lead to misunderstandings. Remember, these tips are all about actively engaging with the speaker, which ties back to the overall goal of effective communication. Keep practicing these habits, and you'll become a better listener and communicator overall. When providing feedback, it's important to remember that your body language and facial expressions can say a lot about whether you truly understand or are engaged. So, Use positive gestures like nodding or leaning forward to show interest and comprehension. Keep your facial expressions open and friendly, which helps create a comfortable environment for open communication. This nonverbal feedback is just as powerful as words, and it reinforces that you're actively listening. Connecting this to our overall theme, effective communication isn't just about what we say, but also about how we say it, through our body language and expressions. These cues encourage others to stay engaged and foster a more productive, respectful exchange. So, to wrap up, I want to highlight the sources I've referred to throughout this presentation. The primary book I used is Business English, published by Pearson Education, created by the Department of English at the University of Delhi. It's a comprehensive resource that covers many key aspects of professional communication. I also drew on the work of Professor Meenakshi Gupta from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology in Powai, Mumbai. Her research and insights have been very valuable in shaping the content and approach of this presentation. In addition, I used several internet websites to gather up-to-date information and examples. These include www.infoplease.com, which offers a wealth of factual data, www.about.com, known for its broad range of explanatory articles, www.elmhurst.edu, which provides helpful educational resources, and www.d.edu, a site that offers various academic and research materials. Overall, these sources have helped ensure that the information I shared is accurate, relevant, and well-rounded, supporting the overall theme of effective communication in business. Thank you.